Hi, I'm Abby, and this is Abby Matt Reads. Today, I am coming at you from the Mafra Convent Library in Mafra, Portugal. And isn't it beautiful? Anyway, this is my January wrap-up where I read 6 books. I know I'm not doing consistent videos, but I'm going to sort that out now. I'm going to get motivated. I'm going to start posting more, and I hope it's all going to go okay, just like I hope this is going to go okay. I'm pretty nervous because it's nearly been a month since I filmed, so let's get on with it. The first book I finished in January was Valley of the Dolls by Jacqueline Susan, and oh my god, was that a good book. It follows 3 young women in the 40s trying to make it in the entertainment industry in the golden age of Hollywood and the tentative beginnings of TV. And you watch their careers go up and down and the things they resort to. The dolls that are mentioned in the title are what these women call their pills, their drugs, their uppers, their downers, just to cope with the demands of the life that they're creating for themselves. This was a really fun book to read, and it was very fast-paced, so if you don't like fast-paced books, then it's not for you. But I found it a kind of very cool, breath of like Hollywood gossip on every single page, with tones of Evelyn Hugo's 7 Husbands, in the way that it kind of exposes the fickleness and nature of the entertainment industry, especially back then. While it always seems kind of glamorous and fun and exciting as well, there's also this kind of undertone for the desperation of these women to be successful and fulfill their dreams, especially in a time where women weren't meant to have their own careers and they were meant to get married and have kids and look pretty. And I think in some ways that hasn't even changed. But the darkness to it and the grittiness to it made it a very kind of believable book to read about this subject. I like that you get 3 different points of view from the 3 women, and each one is so distinct and individual. And it's a kind of like girl power book. It was written in the 60s. I can tell why it became a modern classic. You are going to be rooting for these women and you feel sorry for them, and sometimes they surprise you and even annoy you by doing quite stupid shit, but the connection with the characters is still there, and it was a very good book. I give it 5 stars. I would say this is the second book I have finished in January, but I didn't actually finish it. I kind of DNF'd it halfway through. And that is, let me look at my phone, A Skinful of Shadows by Frances Hardinge. This is a middle grade book. I read Cuckoo Song from Frances Hardinge, and I loved it, and I gave it 5 stars. It's like middle grade horror, and it actually reads quite adult, in a way, the kind of scariness and the darkness to it. And this book was the same. It was kind of very adult. There were parts in it that I felt were too childish for me, though. For example, the plot is basically a young girl in the English Civil War who gets possessed by the spirit of a bear. Okay, so that's one thing. Then she gets taken into this house because she's possessed, and her family sent her away to live with this very rich family who are preparing to be on the king's side for war. And the people there never seem to die, these generations of families. Instead, the ghosts come out of one of them while they die and inhabit the ancestor, lower ancestor. What do you call someone when it's down, when it's younger than you? You know what I mean. Anyway, and it was an interesting plot, but I just could not find myself interested in this book at all. I didn't think that A Skinful of Shadows was a bad book. I just thought it wasn't for me. In the way that A Cuckoo Song was quite adult, and I realised that I'm reading middle grade books, so I shouldn't expect everything to fit my taste, but the plot was just too childish for me. I didn't feel like it was going anywhere. There were long periods of time when not much was happening, and I just don't want to waste my time reading books that I don't enjoy. So I DNF'd it, but I will give it 3 stars because the writing, the prose was absolutely beautiful. There was absolutely nothing wrong with the writing style. Frances Hardinge is a very good writer. I just didn't connect with this book. The 3rd book I finished in January is Let Me Lie by Claire Mackintosh. I've been wanting to read this for a while. I read her one of her books, Now You See Me, I think, about the stalkers on the London Underground. And this book centres on Anna, whose father killed himself in mysterious circumstances, only for months later her mother to do the exact same thing. She gets a message from someone and she starts to doubt that it was suicide at all, and she starts exploring this horrible kind of worry that they might have actually been murdered. I like this book, but it didn't blow me away. I'm quite picky in the thrillers that I read as to how I will continue to read them or decide not to. And it wasn't a case of ever wanting to DNF this book. It just didn't grab me. I think the fake suicide trope in a thriller is, I feel, overdone and kind of a bit of a cliche. I did like Anna's reactions to her grief, then her renewed terror that something bad has happened. It was gut-wrenching. You really felt for her. You were really right there with her, wondering what was going to happen next. And speaking of what was going to happen next, I guessed the first twist and then got all smug thinking that I'd guessed all the rest of them, and I didn't. So that was good. That is always good in a book if you cannot guess the twist. I found the characters quite boring though. I found the relationships, I don't feel like enough work was put into the characters' relationships. They seem to be quite arbitrary. There was one character that I think the book could have done completely without, and I think the book suffered for that. I think my main problem is that there was a character in this book with BPD, like me, and I know that you shouldn't expect your things to be represented correctly all the time, but it was such an awful portrayal of this woman who had BPD that she was useless and she was the bane of her partner's existence, and he was scared that she couldn't be alone for 5 minutes or she'd kill herself. And it made me anxious about how maybe I'm the bane of people's existences. I just didn't appreciate reading about like an illness I have in that kind of context. But all in all, it was a good story and I'm glad I read it, but only 3 stars from me. The 4th book I finished in January was Recursion by Blake Crouch. And oh my god, I loved this book. I doubt I will read another book this year that I will love as much as I love Recursion. It's basically a sci-fi book about a false memory syndrome illness that is affecting people, where they will wake up and they'll have different memories of their lives, and it feels like they've lived 2 lives and they can't figure out which one is real. There's starting up with a bout of suicides because people are so confused and hurt because they'll remember having a child, for example, and then they don't have that child anymore, but they miss that child as if it was really their child. It was really cleverly done, and it went into not just fake memories but time travel, and what is time travel, and can we time travel through memories. The whole book was kind of like a mind fuck along the, on the lines of like Inception and Shutter Island and things like that. It was explosive, like literally in parts explosive, and it was just a thrilling roller coaster ride. Just when you think that something's happening, you'll turn the page, read something, and you'll be like, oh my god, really? and it was just so thrilling and exciting to read. I couldn't put it down. It had my heart going. Oh my god, it was absolutely brilliant. This book was a kind of mindfuck along the lines of like Inception or The Matrix or Shutter Island or something. You could not predict what was going to happen next. It was kind of like a roller coaster thrilling ride, and it draws you in with its like intrigue and interesting and original topic and theme. And as you keep reading, you just keep saying, oh my god, because it just goes into places you didn't think it could go. It's difficult to explain without giving too much away. That's the one thing I'm annoyed about this book, is that I cannot explain it like justifiably to anyone, because you really have to read it to understand what's going on. The characters and their feelings were very deep and raw. I mean, this is a book about memories and how much we cherish them and how we want to live inside them. And of course, there are people in this book who are losing loved ones and losing their minds over things, and it was just like heart-wrenching. Because of the nature of the book and the time travel, there are two different points of view, but they take part over, I'll let you know, hundreds of years, but hundreds of years haven't passed. You'll have to read it to figure out how that worked. And it kept me turning page after page after page, just desperate to see what happens next and how it's going to be concluded. And I can't give this book enough credit. I give it 5 stars, but I would give it 50. The 5th book I finished in January was Bone China by Laura Purcell. I read this on audiobook, as I have with all her previous books, The Corset and The Silent Companions. And they're kind of like set in Victoria. They're kind of gothic horror book. This book is set in Cornwall, where a young woman and her father are trying to cure tuberculosis in these caves on the shore. But people keep talking about these kind of evil fairies that are possessing people and messing things up. And it also takes place about 40 years later, where Hester, maid with medical training, comes to the same house and is a maid to the young woman who is now an old woman, and scary things start happening in that house, and the two timelines just keep piecing themselves together until you come up with quite an intense and uneasy story. I love Purcell's prose. She has this kind of atmospheric writing style that reminds me of Daphne du Maurier, definitely like Rebecca or Jamaica Inn. They kind of share this same gothic-y poetry atmospheric vibe with a hint of mystery to it that was very enjoyable. The character structures sometimes confused me. I liked the two main women's point of view. I could understand what they were doing. I understood their motives. I felt for them and I cared about them, but they were other characters that were like not given as much detail as you need to figure them out and make them relevant to the story, and I think it took away from the story a little bit. I know it's a scary book, but I found it very relaxing to listen to. The pace is quite slow. It's actually got quite a gentle tone, and it was perfect for bedtime, and I give this 4 out of 5 stars. The 6th and last book I finished in January was a book for the Booktube Rereadathon. I picked, the prompt for January was to pick either a translated book or a book where someone spoke a different language. I chose Cleopatras Daughter by Michelle Moran, and I picked this for this prompt because there's a lot of ancient Egyptian words in it, as it focuses on Cleopatra's children after the whole Rome has invaded Egypt, and Cleopatra, as you know, killed herself with a snake bite, and her daughter and her 2 sons are taken as prisoners to Rome, where they meet the kind of Roman head of state and their family, and someone is making an uprising to abolish slavery in Rome, which is causing a lot of trouble. everything was really detailed, and it was fascinating to see Rome through Celine's eyes, Celine being the daughter of Cleopatra, where there's these unspoken different traditions and rules and structures that she'd never heard of. It's you hear a lot about the kind of clothing they wear, the Egyptian style and the Roman style. There's talk about the different gods and the kind of history of ancient Rome. That those details I really loved, and I sucked them up because they were very interesting. Even though the main characters in this story are children, you get the vibe that you recognize this kind of friendship group. I love the dynamics between the children's characters. Also, the adults' characters, they all had their own backstory. There was a lot of things to tweak my interest. They had their own backstory. They had their own motives for doing things. They had their own drive, and it was very well observed. It was great to follow the most powerful family in Rome and see kind of the inner workings of how Rome ran back in the day. My only problem was the pacing, because it completely changed towards the end of the book. It went at a kind of leisurely pace at first, and then it kind of sped up really fast towards the end, and it took me out of the story somewhat. But I'm glad I reread it. I'll probably reread it again in the future, and I gave it 4 stars. Okay, thank you for watching my video. If you could put comments down below telling me what you have read in January, if you've read any of the books I've read, if you want to ask me questions about any of them. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I'm trying to build up as many subscribers as I can, and press the like button because that makes me super happy. You can find me on Twitter at AbbieMattReads, and I got a Facebook page, facebook.com/AbbieMattReads, and that's all from me now. Bye.